All right, I think we're going to get started. We're so glad that you're here on such a beautiful night. My name is Renee Heddick, and I'm the program director of Agape, which is a post-adoption support program up in Central New York. We're absolutely thrilled to have with us today Samantha Reed. She is a doctoral occupational therapy student at the University of Puget Sound, who's been doing incredible work with some of our families in Central New York. And we're thrilled that she's going to come and share sensory-based play for building parent-child relationships today. Do know a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this session, so if you would like to access the recording, please either let your family support specialist know, you can reach out to the coalition, or you can go to AFFCNY.network and you will find this recording in about 2 to 3 days. Also know that at the end of the session, Samantha will field questions and answers for about 30 minutes. Do know that those will not be recorded to protect your confidentiality. So that what will be available recorded will simply be her presentation for the first hour. At the end of the hour, she will open it up to questions and answers. You can put them in the chat box and I'll be monitoring that, or you can simply unmic and talk to Samantha directly. So with that said, I'm absolutely honored and thrilled to have Samantha with us. So I'm going to pass it to her and we can jump into the topic of the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Hello, everybody. I am going to share my screen real quick. One sec. So thank you for joining me tonight. As Renee mentioned, I will be sharing some information around sensory play and how that can help build parent-child connection. I am a graduate student at the University of Puget Sound, but I've moved out here to Central New York now that my classes on campus are done, and I have been working with the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition since January. As Renee said, working with some families. This is part of my final project for school, so I'm thrilled to be here. I'd like to take a moment to thank a couple of occupational therapy faculty who helped me put this presentation together and have been supporting me through my entire final project. Bonnie Riley is an assistant professor at Ithaca College here in New York, and then my faculty mentor, Yvonne Swint, is a professor at the University of Puget Sound. So I am a third-year occupational therapy grad student. This is my final project before I graduate and take the exam to become a licensed OT. But I have spent a lot of time throughout high school and college working with children, specifically with children with developmental and physical disabilities. I worked at a summer camp, as you can see in this photo here. We had lots of sensory supports for kids to help them focus in class. There were headphones. We had some movement tools like the balance board that I'm standing on. And so that's where I first learned about occupational therapy and first started learning about sensory processing as a topic. And then when I was in grad school, my first clinical rotation internship was at a children's clinic that had a specialty in sensory processing. So I learned directly from an OT. And as I mentioned, I've been working with the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition since January. So sensory stuff is something I'm really passionate about, and I'm really excited to share some of that information with you tonight. I'm going to start talking about some foundational ideas and information to help you understand the importance of our sensory systems in general, and then specifically for children from hard places. We often learn about our 5 senses in school: our seeing, hearing, sense of touch, sense of taste, and smell. These senses give us information around about the environment around us, but Many people don't know that there's actually 3 additional senses that tell us information about our body. So one of those senses is called proprioception, which comes from our muscles and joints and helps us know where our body is in space. So if I have my arm raised over my head, I know it's over my head because all of my muscles are engaging to lift my arm up. And when we are exercising or doing hard work with our bodies, we're using our proprioceptive system. The next sense is our vestibular sense, which tells us how our body is moving, and the information comes from inside our head in what's called the inner ear. Our vestibular system tells us whether we're moving forwards, backwards, if we're spinning. When we get dizzy, that's our vestibular system telling us, hey, we're really dizzy right now. We're spinning in circles. And our vestibular system also tells us if our head is upright or if it's tilted to the side. And it really helps us know when we're balanced. And then the 8th sense is called interoception, which is our body's way of telling us how it's doing on the inside. So all of our internal organs give us interoception sense, and we can tell when we're hungry, when we're thirsty, if we're too hot or too cold, if we need to go to the bathroom. So I will come back and talk about these a little bit more later in the presentation, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to some of the senses we're going to be talking about tonight. I want you to take a moment and think about this question. How is the sensory information in your environment right now impacting your ability to focus? Because we're in a virtual presentation, we're all in different spaces, and each of our bodies may have different things helping us or taking away from our focus. You may think about if there are bright lights, if there's any background noise. Maybe you have children or pets who are in the background, and that could be distracting at some times, but you're still able to focus on me talking. Maybe your body's really relaxed because it's warm out today, and so that just helps you kind of settle in and pay better attention. Maybe you're sitting in a comfortable chair. So notice how there's a lot going on in our environment and a lot that our bodies are noticing, but you're all still able to listen and hear what I'm talking about and follow along. For some people and children specifically, any one piece of this sensory information in their environment could be overwhelming, and overwhelming to a point that they may not be able to focus. So keep that in mind as we continue our talk. This image of the brain is a representation of Dan Siegel's upstairs and downstairs brain model, which some of you may be familiar with. He often uses his own hand to demonstrate the parts of the brain. As a quick review, he says that the downstairs part of the brain is responsible for our survival and safety. And this is the part of the brain that does sensory processing, which is how our brain understands all of the information that our senses are picking up around us from outside in our environment and within our bodies. So the sensory information enters the lower brain first, and then we kind of understand what's going on when we use our upstairs brain, which is the part of our brain that thinks through situations, does planning, it does our problem solving, and this part of the brain can help us think through situations to help us understand if we're in danger or not. So for example, if we're walking in a neighborhood and we suddenly hear a dog barking nearby, our downstairs brain may immediately react hearing that and signal danger and cause us to flinch away from where we hear the dog. Our upstairs brain then takes a little bit longer to kick in, but then it can tell us, oh, there's a fence between the dog and between me, so I'm safe. For children from hard places, when they hear the dog barking, it may send a signal that is so big and so kind of forceful that there's danger, that they are not able to use their upstairs brain anymore, which Dan Siegel calls flipping the lid. And so when this happens, a child can have a meltdown or become overwhelmed or need to calm back down through different strategies to help re-engage the upstairs part of the brain. Another way of thinking about this, I know this picture has a lot of words to it, but I'm going to walk you through and describe it. This shows another way to think about how the brain works. The bottom of this pyramid shows the foundation of our brain and our body development is from our sensory system. So what we see, what we hear, what we're feeling within our body, and what we can feel in our environment. As we get older and we start to be able to move around, as babies, our brains learn how to understand the sensory information around us, and then also how we can interact with our world around us. We can plan to move our bodies to be able to reach for a toy while keeping one hand maybe positioned on the ground so that we don't fall over. And as we get older, we can begin to figure out that when somebody throws a ball to us, we can see it coming and lift up our hands and catch it with our eye-hand coordination. So that's a little bit more of a higher level skill because we're using two sensory systems. We're using our eyes, we're using our hands to be able to catch the ball. So that's higher up on the pyramid. And then at the top of this pyramid, we get to a point around elementary school age where we start to be able to think more complex thoughts, learn things in school, know what clothes to wear when it's cold out, and how to have conversations with people that maybe we're upset by, so we have to control our behavior a little bit more. Kids from hard places may still be working on understanding their sensory systems and how to interact with their environment. So an important thing to keep in mind is if they're focused on how to stay calm with all the sensory information that their brain is thinking about and getting information about, they won't be able to then use their brain to focus on complex thinking, such as learning in school. And so this image can be a really helpful tool when talking to teachers and helping them understand that when your child is in their classroom and is being maybe isn't able to focus or is being disruptive, it could be that their body is still working on how to understand with their body senses and know what's going on around them. And they may really struggle with the higher level skills on this pyramid of staying calm and focused. I'm going to talk a little bit about the effects of early trauma on the sensory systems. So a child's experience of trauma can affect the development of their sensory systems and their brain's ability to understand the sensory information around them. Going back to that pyramid, it's what keeps kids down at the bottom. They're still trying to figure out how to do all those skills. And if a child's brain and body are constantly on the lookout for danger because they experienced trauma early in life, they may be in a chronic or constant state of being dysregulated or unable to calm down. A child could also have a more sensitive stress response after experiencing trauma, meaning that they may very easily enter into a fight, flight, or freeze response based on how their brain, and most likely their downstairs brain, is understanding what's happening around them. Because of a more sensitive stress response, children often find it more difficult to self-regulate, meaning that they struggle to find ways to calm down by themselves after becoming overwhelmed, or they struggle to stay calm during stressful times. When the brain is rapidly developing in early childhood, stress can affect a child's ability to understand and use sensory information, which is called sensory integration. And that's what the brain does to make sense of all of the things that it's seeing and hearing and feeling to be able to form an understanding of what's going on in your environment. Finally, Traumatic or stressful experiences can cause a child to dissociate from their body at times, meaning that they distance themselves from what they're feeling and experiencing. This can make it difficult for a child to know what their body and what their sensory systems are trying to tell them, and could look like a child having difficulty knowing when they need to go to the bathroom or when they're feeling hungry or thirsty. So being playful is something that really helps our kids. And being playful as an adult can help us as adults to become more flexible and adaptive, which can help us think about difficult situations as challenges to learn from and develop skills from, rather than as something that cannot be overcome and that's too big of a mountain to climb, something that we wouldn't be able to do. Playfulness in children leads to benefits such as increased creativity, humor, motivation, and a positive mood. So playing is beneficial for all of us. Play also gives parents and children an opportunity to be attentive to one another and to listen both with their ears and by watching body language when they're playing together. An attuned play between caregivers and children has been found to produce a sense of love, interest between each other, contentment, enjoyment, and curiosity. And so, this cooperative play between parents and their children can help the development of children's emotional, social, and cognitive skills and strengthens the caregiver child relationship. Building strong relationships and secure attachment is really important for our kids because positive relationships can help be a protective factor against harmful impacts from childhood trauma that the child may have experienced. Play that focuses on giving sensory information or input to a child is called sensory play. Through sensory play, children have the chance to become more comfortable with different sensations that they feel, maybe different textures, hearing different sounds, smelling or tasting different things, or moving their bodies in different ways to feel different movements. And by experiencing these sensations, they can feel while they're in a play space within a safe environment with their caregiver. It helps them get more practice regulating themselves or staying calm while they're reacting to those sensations. So, this brings us back to the focus of this presentation tonight, which is to help build connection between parents and children through sensory play. It's really important to understand that each of us likes and dislikes different sensory sensations, and we all have our own preferences. What a child likes and what your child likes may not be the same as what you as the parent like. So, for example, your child may not enjoy loud noises while you enjoy listening to music through speakers in the house or through your car. You may like the feeling of hugging your loved ones, holding hands with them, sitting next to them on the couch, while your child may not like to be touched. It is important to understand both your own likes and dislikes and your child's likes and dislikes. Our tolerance for experiencing different sensory information can change over time, meaning how much our body can take before we get overwhelmed and are like, okay, I'm done. So our tolerance can change throughout the day. For example, in the morning, you may be able to be okay hearing your child yell or be loud or be playing loud music. But by the end of the day, after a long day of working, cooking, cleaning, supporting your child through difficult times, you may become more agitated by the end of the day when you hear loud noises or if you smell something that is just too overpowering. Your child also may have spent their whole day at school holding it together despite being uncomfortable with various sensory information in their environment. And then when they get home, they may fall apart and just have a meltdown. So that shows that their own tolerance changes throughout the day. They try really hard to hold it together at school, and then they know home's a safe place, so that can be where they melt down. As we get older, our likes and dislikes may change as well. Some people who loved roller coasters and swings as a kid are no longer able to go on those rides because they get too dizzy. In this example, their vestibular system is too sensitive to those big movements. Another example is that some children who get car sick when they're young may grow up and not get car sick anymore because their vestibular system is more used to the movement. So I want to talk a little bit about co-regulation right now and its transition into self-regulation. So before a child knows how to calm themselves down and to self-regulate, parents help them calm down by co-regulating. You can think about how parents hold and rock infants, speak to them in soothing voices, know when they are hungry, and then they feed them to help the baby feel better. And as children get older, we begin to teach them ways that they can self-regulate while still co-regulating a little bit as well. So a child may suck on their thumb or seek out their favorite stuffed animal or a blanket to hold on to. Older children may know that they need time alone in their room to go calm down, or they need to move their bodies, like jumping on a trampoline or running around outside to get their energy out. But for our kids from hard places, they may need a lot more help with the co-regulation and may struggle to the transition to help self-regulate. So as part of this co-regulation process, children look to their parents to see how they handle stressful situations. And children from hard places are highly in tune with their caregivers' moods and body language. They can sense your mood through your tone of voice, how loud your voice is, even sometimes how fast you're breathing, or if they can feel your heartbeat, how fast your heart is beating. And it's difficult to help your child re-regulate when you as the parent are not regulated. So it's important to recognize your own sensory needs because again, they may be similar to or different from the sensory needs of your child. So here are some questions to ask yourself to better understand your own sensory needs. What calms you down? Does being in a quiet space make you calm? Does moving your body, like going for a walk or stretching or doing some exercise, help calm you down? What makes you feel overwhelmed? Do loud noises bother you? Does it make you overwhelmed when multiple children are trying to talk to you at once? Or do you get more easily overwhelmed when you're hungry or when you're tired or after a long day at work? What does your child like that you don't? So again, you may enjoy listening to music to help calm you down, but if your child needs quiet when they're dysregulated, maybe that is then harder for you. For both you and your child, being better regulated can lead to better communication. And it goes back to the upstairs and downstairs brain model, where if you're both regulated and calm, you're both using your upstairs brain, that leads to better communication. Whereas if people are dysregulated, if your child has flipped their lid, or if you feel like you're close to flipping your lid, we're functioning a lot more down here in the downstairs brain and we're not able to communicate as well. So while our child's sensory experiences are kind of the focus of tonight's presentation, I'm also challenging you to think about your own sensory needs because it's a two-way street. Oh, and on this slide, not on that slide, sorry. I want to introduce the idea of being a sensory detective to you. Because I can't come into your homes and meet with you and talk about all of your kids' likes and dislikes. I'm giving you the information for you to be in your home and be a sensory detective and figure some things out for yourself, which can be daunting, but that's why we're here tonight. So with the mindset of a sensory detective, you can think about how your child's behavior may be not because they're trying to make you upset or something, but because they're uncomfortable with certain sensory information in their environment. So thinking of their behavior and body language as a way that they're communicating to you can be helpful in understanding the why of their behavior. A child may have a meltdown because one or more parts of their environment may be overwhelming. So think about what it looks like when your child is overwhelmed or having a meltdown, and what it looks like when they're calm and engaged. If they're overwhelmed, do they hunch their shoulders and kind of go into themselves a little bit? Do they turn away from you or anyone else who's talking? Do they squeeze their eyes shut if things are too bright or too loud? Do they flinch away from loud noises? Or do they get really loud, use a loud voice, scream, cry? When they're engaged, are they facing the activity? Are their eyes focused on the toys that they're using? Are they reaching for objects? Are they more relaxed throughout their body? Are they using an indoor voice or an excited voice that you know is different from the screaming, the overwhelmed voice? So being sensitive to how your child is showing you their needs shows them that you're listening to them, both with through their words, but also through their body language. So when you're having a tough time with your child, I challenge you to think about either in the moment, if you have that ability, or afterwards, once you're ready to use more of your upstairs brain again, think about how is the sensory information during your child's hard time impacting your own ability to focus? And then how is sensory information impacting your child's ability to focus? And so this is a reflection piece that you can think about after the fact. You can think about if you do a quick scan of the room when they're becoming upset or dysregulated and you see, oh, there's this light flickering, maybe that's bothering them. That can be something that's in the moment. And as you become more comfortable in recognizing what your children like and dislike as far as sensory experiences, you can even think in advance and go, I know we're going to a really crowded place and that all the noise bothers my child. What can I do to help support them through that? So you're kind of thinking beforehand how you can help your child. And so we have to do some problem solving as a sensory detective. We have to ask ourselves, what does my child need to calm down, to focus, or to be able to better participate in this activity? Whether if that's at school, whether if that's maybe eating a family dinner at the table, whether that's playing with their sibling. And so you can think about, do they need a quiet space? Or would it be helpful for them to hear some music right now? Or maybe hear me talking about my day in a calm manner, just so that they have some sound around them. Do they need to move their body to be able to get their energy out? Or do they just need a hiding spot so that they can feel safe and comfortable? So these are some of the things you can start thinking about. So getting into more of being a sensory detective. You want to start thinking about what could be causing the discomfort. And like I mentioned with scanning the environment, you want to think about all different senses, especially the ones that you know your child is more sensitive to and that they dislike more. Are there any really bad smells or strong smells? Is there anything too bright? Are things distracting because so much is going on? Is there maybe a texture that they have to touch or walk on that's really upsetting to them? Are there things that are too loud? Do they need to move their body? Have they been still for a really long time and maybe need some body movement? Has it been a while since they ate or if they drank water? Have they gone to the bathroom recently? So these are all things to think about as what could be causing discomfort for your child if you notice them beginning to get upset. Transitions are another thing that often cause distress or can be a challenge for children, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So transitions are difficult because they're change. And a child may have big reactions to transition times because change is scary. And especially for children from hard places, they may constantly be wondering, is this change okay? Is this change going to hurt me? Their survival instincts may kick in due to having a sensitive response or a stress response. And what we may think of as, oh, that's a big reaction for them, maybe because their body's trying to keep them safe. And that change can be really scary. So think about, for just a quick second, how many transitions do you think your child goes through in a typical day? How many times does their environment have to change? Do they have to change activities? It's a lot. Even if you think about a day of going to school, They have to wake up in the morning. And even from the time when they wake up to when they get to school, there's a lot of tiny transitions. We have to get out of bed. We have to get dressed. We have to go into the bathroom to brush our teeth and brush our hair. We have to go into the kitchen to eat breakfast. We have to go to the bus or go to the car. We then have to be in the car or the bus, get off the car and the bus. And then we're just at school and it's only like 7:30 and there's still a whole day left of transitions, where we're learning different subjects, where we go to math and then we go to reading. We'll have to go to lunch and then recess, and then maybe there's specials of PE or library. And after all of those transitions, a kid returns home and there's dinner or maybe after school activities, time to be able to play at home, but then we have to come to dinner and eat food and maybe take a bath and get ready for bed. And then going to bed can be a real difficult thing as well. And that's just a normal school day. On the weekends, they're different because there's no school. And then summertime or vacation times can also be different because travel may be involved. And that's a lot of maybe different travel, long car rides, riding on a plane, new bed to sleep in, new routines throughout the day, new activities that the family's doing. Everything has changed. And even having family or friends come into town and visit, there's suddenly new people, which is a change. Again, the activities throughout the day may be different. So our kids go through an extraordinary amount of transitions at any given day. To help with this, routines give stability. So even though transitions happen throughout the day, changes can become predictable and familiar to the child. So as your child becomes comfortable with familiar transitions, you can increase the amount of unpredictable change a little bit at a time. So maybe if our kids are really used to the school routine, maybe one day, instead of eating breakfast at home, we get breakfast on the way to school. Now that may be such a huge change that that's too much, but maybe we try that on the weekend. We go out to eat. And then we can come home and have all that time to help calm back down and be like, oh, that was a fun new adventure, or something like that. So I have some ideas for providing some stability into transition times. So one idea could be using a visual timer to help the child know when the change is coming. Sometimes change is really scary because kids don't have a great understanding of time, and so they think it's just always going to come, and they don't have a concept of, oh, 15 to 20 minutes, we have still a lot of time to be able to have fun and play. So sometimes a visual timer can help, just so that they can see, oh, the time is moving slowly and there's still a big chunk of blue that we can play on the playground. Creating a daily schedule, like what you see on the right-hand side of my screen, can be helpful, just so that the kids know what events are coming up today. And even the act of making the list can be a routine. So even if the events change, it's a weekend now, what we're doing is different than when we went to school on Friday, we're still making a schedule. And so the kids can become calmer in the fact that, oh, I know what things are going to happen today. Some kids may not be able to sit through and write a whole list with you of what's happening. And so a first then chart, like what you see as the middle picture, could be helpful for your child. I would write maybe grocery store under the first box, and then park in the second box. And then once you write that, either on a piece of paper or a little whiteboard, you can show your child and say, first, we're going to go to the grocery store, and then we're going to go to the park, so that they know that even if the grocery store is an activity that they don't like or that causes them stress, there is something to look forward to after, and the grocery store will end. We are going to be doing something next. Regardless of whether these help a child transition through the day, there will be unpredictable change. There will be a change in your schedule and you have to take your kids to the doctor because a time just opened up, or have to go pick somebody up from school when they thought they were riding the bus home. So it's important to be able to help calm your child down and re-regulate them after those times where they may get dysregulated or overwhelmed. And so we're going to start thinking about different tools for dealing with transitions and times when a child may get overwhelmed. So first, think about what calms you as the parent down. Again, is it being in a quiet space, having a moment to yourself, taking some deep breaths? Maybe you need to move your body, go for a walk, do even just some stretching in the living room. And now we're going to think about how you can work to understand what your child needs through observations and, again, being that sensory detective. I have an analogy to think about sensory input as a radio. And as you can see on this radio, there's two different dials, and that's because there's two different things that I want you to think about. One dial is for volume of the radio, and the other dial is to tune the radio station. So as sensory detectives, we need to think about two different parts of sensory input. One part, which is represented by the volume dial, is how much input do they need? Do they need a really big hug or a really big squeeze? Or do they just need maybe to lay under a blanket, something that is covering them and helps them feel safe, but isn't a squeeze from a parent? Or do they need really loud music? To help them just kind of get some rhythm and feel more centered in their body? Or do they need quiet music to help them calm down? Do they need to move their body a lot, like jumping on a trampoline? Or do they need small body movements, like playing with Play-Doh to work with their fingers, but they don't necessarily need to move their whole body? The other part we need to think about is what type of sensory input does a child need to calm down and focus? So again, this is where we're tuning the radio to different radio stations. Maybe our child needs a soothing classical musical station. So maybe that could be like the tight hug, something that's calming, being wrapped in a blanket so that they get a little bit of a squeeze. Or maybe the child needs more of an upbeat rock and roll music station. So for example, maybe they need to go out and move their body and use their muscles and get some energy out. So just keep this, this radio in mind as we move forward. I'm going to be talking about some different activities. And I want to just say that some of these activities won't work for every child. But I'm trying to give a range of ideas for activities so that you can see kind of the wide amount of possibilities. And then over time, you can help figure out what works for your child. So remember that proprioceptive input involves using our muscles and our joints. And this helps a child know where their body is in space. So think about body movements that will help a child have better control and coordination of their body. For example, running around gives proprioceptive input to the body through our legs, through our arms, through our tummy muscles. But a child can become easily overexcited when running around, and it may not help them calm down. So I have on this slide, and what I'm going to talk about are some more purposeful activities where they're going to be using their body, but there's going to be a little bit more structure to them. So heavy work is a type of proprioceptive activity that we say when kids are using their body to push, pull, or lift heavy things. So they have to work hard, and that's the heavy work part of it. This could be helping with things around the house, like carrying groceries in. Maybe you give them a grocery bag or two to help carry in, and that's going to be really heavy for them, but they're helping you, and they're working their muscles and getting some proprioceptive input. Maybe they can help move the laundry basket full of clothes. Maybe they can help hold open doors while you're moving other things through the doorways. They could pick up their toys by carrying a basket around and putting toys in the basket, so they're having to hold a heavier and heavier basket as they're picking up their toys. Um, these ideas are how to work body movement throughout the day so that your child is getting proprioceptive input a little bit at a time. And it also helps make transitions a little bit more fun and a little bit more purposeful of, we're not just walking to the car, help me carry the groceries from the grocery store to the car. They are then engaged in an activity, are helping, and have to think a little bit more than just walking to the car, and maybe they would be more likely to try and run off or just get distracted by things. Big body movements are another thing that I want to talk about. Think about, how can we get from point A to point B in a fun way that takes more energy than just walking? You could jump like a bunny, so a bunny hop, all the way from maybe the front door to the car. You could bear crawl, which is a child on their hands and their feet with their bottoms sticking up in the air. That they have to use their arms a lot. A crab walk, where they have their hands behind them and lift their bottom off the floor to either shuffle forward or backwards. Maybe walking backwards. So your child has to be a little bit more aware of their environment around them. They have to use their legs in a different way than walking forward. And let your child get creative. What animal movements can you come up with? Does your child love elephants? So they could elephant stomp, use really heavy footsteps and pretend to have an elephant trunk, or waddle like a penguin and have to take really tiny steps. With some of these big body movements, using the arms can be really helpful because our legs are used to moving us around all day. We don't typically walk around on our arms. And so when we do use our arms for moving our bodies, especially for our kids, for us, we can get tired really easily, but our kids, it takes more energy and focus for their bodies, but it's giving them a lot more proprioceptive input when they can get it through their arms as well. And this takes me into the next thing of use of hand muscles. So the muscles in our hands are really small, but they're really strong, and we use them a lot throughout the day. So activities like playing with Play-Doh, the kids have to squish the Play-Doh and really use a lot of different muscles in their hands while playing with that. Another idea could be putting fun little treasures of maybe some beads or marbles or tiny toys into the Play-Doh or in a substance like silly putty, so that the child has to squish the texture around and find the little toys and pull them out of the Play-Doh or the silly putty. So there could be other fidget toys that work the fingers a lot. Something like a fidget spinner isn't necessarily going to provide a lot of proprioceptive input because it's really easy to just like flick your finger and spin it around. But there's little like fidget cubes with different buttons you can press and switches. So something like that could also be beneficial. Oral motor activities are things that we do with our mouth, such as blowing bubbles or drinking through a straw. Think about how young kids may find sucking on a pacifier or sucking on their thumb to be calming. It's basically the same thing. We're using our mouths to get proprioceptive input. We have muscles in our cheeks and in our lips that we're using when we're either blowing bubbles or drinking something through a straw. Also, our jaw is the strongest joint in our body. And so chewing things can provide a lot of proprioceptive input. So if your kid's old enough to chew gum, that's something that it doesn't go away for a while. So they can sit there and maybe in the car ride, they're chewing gum. And even though they're buckled into their seat, they're still getting proprioceptive input through their jaw, or eating chewy foods like dried fruit or fruit snacks gives a lot more proprioceptive input, or eating something crunchy like chips, that gives an even different sensation, and gives some sound as well of how the chips just break apart in their mouth. So even eating can, different things that we eat can give us proprioceptive input as well. And when we're drinking things through a straw, drinking water or juice, that's great. But if you want a little bit more challenge for your kid, you can have them drink something that's thicker, like applesauce through a straw or a smoothie through a straw. They have to work a lot harder to suck through the straw to get the smoothie out than they would water. The last little piece I want to talk about for proprioceptive activities is giving structure to movement. Like I talked about with running around, yes, that gives proprioceptive input, but it also has the potential for their energy to go to a high, and they're not calming down, they're just winding themselves up. So making an obstacle course where we make a plan of we're going to do 3 things to get to the finish line, and then you can always repeat as many times as your child needs to kind of get their energy out. So we could walk along the edge of a rug in a room, or set pillows out on the ground and step on the pillows, like stepping stones. You could jump over the pillows. Maybe the kid, as they're making their way around the room, they give you a high five as they go by. Maybe part of the challenge is to bear crawl from the kitchen to the living room, so they're using their body more. Maybe the final step is they jump onto the couch and flop their body on the couch, so they get a lot of it's fun to squish into something, and they are getting a lot of input, like a kind of a squeeze when they flop on the couch. And then you restart, and you see part of the challenge is remembering the correct order that we did the steps in. And so sometimes 3 to maybe 5 steps for younger kids, 2 to 3 steps are enough. For some older kids who can remember more steps, 4 and 5 steps can be really good. Another thing that you could play is the floor is lava. So depending on your policy with climbing on furniture in the house, have the child get from point A to point B without touching the floor. Again, we could put pillows on the ground. We could maybe roll up a blanket and have the blanket be kind of a balance beam that you can walk on the blanket but don't touch the floor. And climbing, how are they going to get from the armchair to the couch without touching the floor? Will they put something down? Do they need help being lifted over? So having them use a little bit of their creativity so that they don't touch the lava. The next type of activity is deep pressure, which is part of our touch system of our 5 senses. So giving a big bear hug or getting a squeeze from a parent is a way to get deep pressure. Think about how we swaddle babies. We're wrapping them up so that they get what feels like a hug, or what feels like being in the mom's womb, of just the pressure all over the body. So maybe your child likes a big bear hug. Maybe they don't like as much physical contact or like a full hug. So you can always massage the hands along the palms, maybe around the fingers, putting pressure into the hands. You can squeeze the shoulders down, and you can feel on yourself. You don't want to go super hard. You don't want to hurt anybody, obviously. And your child will tell you if it's enough. But this is something that they can also teach. You can teach for them to do to themselves, or maybe they just are sitting in class getting upset, and so squeezing is helpful. Squeezing your own hands. You could squeeze your hands together as another way. And for kids who don't, maybe that is also too much touching, we could make a pillow fort. and being buried under pillows. Some kids like the parent to lean on the pillows so that we're not touching the child, but we are leaning some of our weight in so that it feels really good and it feels kind of like a hug through the pillows. Another idea you can see in the top photo is being wrapped up in a blanket like a burrito. Again, that is kind of like swaddling a baby, how they get the pressure. And if a kid doesn't want their arms in, you can have them raise their arms above their head, and you can just wrap their torso and their legs up. Swimming is something when we're in the pool or even in the bathtub, the water is pressing on our skin all over. So that is one way of getting deep pressure input. Swimming is a cool 2 for the price of 1 because you're also having the child get proprioceptive input when they're swimming around, moving their muscles. They're getting a lot of heavy work. They're moving their muscles a lot when they're swimming. Another idea is a body sock. I don't know if any of you have these in your home, but they're kind of like a stretchy elastic material, as you can see in the bottom picture on this slide. And kids, it takes some effort to stretch your arms out because it's kind of like giving you a hug while you're in there. And so having the kid move around, maybe they do jumping jacks in there, or maybe they crawl around or make snow angels on the ground and have to move their arms. So again, they are getting some muscle movement, some proprioceptive input, but it is like they're getting a squeeze as well. Remember that our vestibular system is in our head, and it helps sense movement, especially when our head moves to help us stay balanced. Fast movements like spinning wake us up and make us feel excited or maybe even unsettled if we get nauseous. So it's important to use rhythmic movements to help the child stay calm. So think about how you would calm down an upset baby. We would carry them around until they calm down. You're kind of swaying side to side. You're maybe constantly just walking in a slow pattern or rocking in a chair. So activities similar to this can be really helpful, where maybe you're swinging in a hammock and just back and forth, not too high, to keep it really calm. Or rocking in a chair. Maybe the kid wants to sit in the rocking chair by themselves. Maybe they're sitting on your lap and you're just slowly rocking back and forth. That rhythmic movement is very calming. Maybe your child likes to be held, and while you're either standing or sitting, you're swaying and rocking your body side to side or forward and backwards. And even walking is a rhythmic movement that our kids can do that can be really calming. Jumping is another 2 for the price of 1. You get some vestibular input because you're going up and down, but the kid has to use their muscles. And so they're also getting proprioceptive input when they're jumping as well. So sometimes jumping in place can just help reset, or like I mentioned earlier, bunny hopping from point A to point B. Maybe we bunny hop to go out to the car before we buckle up for a ride. With vestibular activities, because there can be the option to get excited if we swing too much or if we're spinning, sometimes adding in another activity. So maybe we're swinging and we're singing a song together, or you ask your child to tell me the alphabet, or ask them to do a math problem of what's 1 + 3. So they're having to think with their brain a little bit while they're getting movement, so they don't kind of get stuck in the movement. They're using their brain. They're still actively engaging to help themselves calm down instead of just passively swinging. So passive, they're not really doing anything, but active, they're swinging and having to think. Or you could play catch with your child while they're in a rocking chair or on a swing. Maybe you toss a stuffed animal back and forth, or a ball while they're swinging, or you find something to act as a basketball hoop, and they have to make baskets while they're swinging back and forth. So they're getting some repetitive movement, but then they're also having to focus on a challenge and use their brain a little bit, and kind of center themselves back in, because if they're wild and moving all around, they won't be able to make the basket. They kind of have to focus and be calm to be able to do that. So those are some of the other activities that you can do when you're doing having your child do vestibular activities, if that's what they like. And some kids, again, may like more active things like proprioceptive input, where they have to move their body, and they may like just being moved in a rhythmic way. So again, it will be dependent on the child. I've written down some regulation activities for on the go. So whether you're out and about in the community or at school, these are things that you can teach your child to use so that even when you're not there, maybe they can help use these strategies for themselves. So a hand sandwich, I put palms together and then you press your palms together like you're squeezing your hands together, or you're squeezing something, some sandwich materials in between the pieces of bread that we're pretending our hands are. And so then I would ask a kid, what's in your hand sandwich? I have ham and cheese and lettuce on mine. And then, or you could get really silly. I have chocolate and scrambled eggs on mine, to kind of be a little playful and see, then you can pretend to eat it. What does your sandwich taste good? Mine does not. But it's really helpful for keeping hands to self. So if you have multiple kids and they're all over each other, you can ask for, show me your hand sandwich. And then they have to put their hands together and they're suddenly not all over each other's space anymore. And then that can start a conversation of, oh, I just saw your body looked really excited. What can we do to help calm down? And this is getting a little bit of proprioceptive input. We're using our muscles a little bit to push against ourselves. Another way is we can pull our hands apart, so hooking our fingers together. And this uses muscles and joints all the way up and down the arms. So that can be a really nice way of just try and hold it for 5 seconds, 2, 3, and then relax your body. Seated push-ups, we could try when we're sitting at the dinner table, or when we're sitting at a desk at school, maybe even in a car seat, of pushing your hands down against your seat of whatever you're sitting on, and trying lifting your bottom up off the seat. Sometimes your legs can help with that, or sometimes you can challenge your kiddo to just use their arms. Again, that's making them use a lot of their arm and upper body muscles. And then as you can see in this photo here of this little kid doing wall push-ups. So starting with your arms straight against the wall, your feet a little bit away from the wall, and then leaning in and pushing back out. Again, using the arm muscles, using the tummy muscles, and then some of the back muscles. So this gives a lot of proprioceptive input. Movement breaks throughout the day. As we've been talking about, how can we get from point A to point B in a fun way? Even what is a transition of going from the house to the car, or from the car into school, can then be a fun little movement break where we pretend to be a lion. How would a lion walk? What does a lion say when it walks? Things like that. Another idea, especially for in the car, could be there's stretchy exercise bands. You could tie this either around the full front seat, so that when your child's in the back seat, they can pull on it, or tie this to something like maybe a handle on the back seat, so they can start getting some of their arm muscles working, but they're still in their car seat, they're still being safe. There can also be You could have some fidgets in the car that are specifically for the car that don't come into the house, so that they're a new and fun thing for when we're in the car. And again, something that gives a lot of work to the hands, like Play-Doh, or if that's too messy for your kids in the car, just something maybe squishy that they can pinch between their fingers. Another way to get movement breaks throughout the day, especially at school, is telling the teacher to give them little tasks around the room of, when we're helping push the chairs away, make sure my kid's helping do that, because that will help them move their body in a way that's going to really calm them down. Or carrying books when they are, maybe they're taking the books out of their desk, or putting them away. Or maybe we have to clean out the book tubs, and so moving the book tubs can be a really great way to get some heavy input. The last little piece that I wanted to talk tonight about is interoception. And we spoke about this earlier, how it's our internal organs telling us what's going on inside. Are we hungry? Are we thirsty? Are we too hot? Are we too cold? Do we have to go to the bathroom? Sometimes we can even feel our heart rate. If our heart's beating really fast, that can be a signal that, oh, I'm stressed out about something, or I'm really anxious. And then our kids from hard places can have a really difficult time being connected to their body because, like I mentioned earlier, of possible dissociation, distancing themselves from what their body was feeling. So they may not be used to listening to the signals that their body gives. So they may not be as aware that, oh, this feeling means I need to go to the bathroom, or, oh, this type of stomach pain means I'm hungry and I need to eat, or I need to try and go to the bathroom. And so I want to share some ideas of how to help increase your child's body awareness. Narrating your own experiences can be really helpful. Maybe it's later in the day and you look at your watch and say, oh my goodness, it's 5 o'clock already. We haven't eaten since lunch. I can feel my body needs some food. I feel my stomach kind of bubbling or grumbling. And then you can ask, what does your body feel like? Do you feel hungry in your toes? And then the kid may say yes, but may say no. And then you're calling their attention to different parts of their body. Narrating your own experience can also be really helpful for transitions. Maybe you are late for an appointment or late for school, and you could tell your child, this transition's really stressful for me. I need to take some deep breaths right now. I need to help myself calm down. I know we're running late, and that is really stressful. So kind of being explicit, sharing your feelings to help validate any feelings your child may be having. Calling attention to body sensations throughout the day. So this could be a little bit of what I talked about before of, oh, I'm feeling hungry. It could also be other senses. Like if your child's walking around barefoot, ask them, what does the grass feel like on your feet? Or do you like walking on the rocks? And see what their response is. And then they just have to focus on that specific body part. And you could give them an option. You could say, does it feel good or bad? And then they could at least tell you whether they like the sensation or not. Proprioceptive input, which is moving our muscles and our joints, tells our body where it is in space. I had a girl that I was working with. She said, when I stop moving, I just forget where I am. So I always just stand and shift my weight so that I know where I am in time and space. And I thought that was so cool that she could tell me that experience of why she needed to move her body so much. And so an example of a game we could play is Twister, and we could play it normally. There's also, I've come up with some ideas for how to change the rules a little bit. If your child doesn't quite know right versus left, we could say hands versus feet. So I could say, put your hands on yellow, and then I could mimic putting both of my hands on yellow dots, and then say, what color do you want to put your feet on? And then they can pick a color. Or we could say, jump on a color, and we could have them put their whole body on that color. And even if we don't have Twister in the house, we could play a game that's similar and have the child put specific parts of their body on different things in their environment. So it could be touch your head to the couch, and then they have to figure out how they want to put their head on the couch. Or maybe touch your toes to my fingers, and maybe they have to stand on one foot and put a leg in the air, or maybe they jump on the couch and stretch their feet out. Or touch your nose to something green, and then they have to find something green within the house. So you're calling their attention both to different parts of their body and to the environment around them. A last this is the wrap up section. So general tips for playfulness that I have are to, when you're playing with your child, ask them questions, give them choices. Our kids tend to like to be in control because so much of their day they can't be in control. And so sharing control through play by asking, oh, how are we going to play with these trucks? Or what do you think how do you think we should get from the kitchen to the living room? Do you think we should walk in a silly way? Do you think we should dance? Sharing the control gives them the opportunity to have more creativity and also independence in their play. Giving structure for self-regulation, again, going back to if a child needs to move their body, having them run around in the front yard may only wind them up. Whereas if you ask them to make an obstacle course with you, we have to remember certain steps. We have to move our bodies in a more challenging way. We have to bear crawl, slows them down, makes them move more muscles, and has them use their brain a little bit. That can be, it gives, again, the proprioceptive input through our muscles and our joints, but they're not going to be bouncing off the walls. They have to try and do a specific thing. And again, it's also helpful for vestibular input because swinging or rocking could be exciting for a child, helping still keep their brain engaged, can help calm them down. And I also wanted to say that playful doesn't necessarily look a certain way. We may think of playful as like laughing a lot and playing with big movements and roughhousing, but playful can also be sharing some quiet happiness with your child of, oh my goodness, do you feel how the grass is on your feet? It rained last night and it's still kind of wet. Observing the world that way. Touching, maybe you're making cookies with your kid and you can smell really amazing smells already. Maybe you can smell the chocolate chips that you put in. So playful doesn't have to look all one way. It can look like a variety of things. And then wrapping up our sensory detective skills, remember to think about what makes your child overwhelmed. Think about what helps calm your child down. And then thinking back to our radio analogy of, do they need more of something? Do they need something to be toned down or a little bit quieter? And then tuning the station, do they need to move their body? Do they need to hear some music? Do they need to have a squeeze? Do they need a quiet space? And then bringing it back to yourself because of the co-regulation. Is there anything I, as the parent, need to feel less overwhelmed right now? there's a lot to think of. And again, it doesn't all have to be in the moment. It can be before, it can be after. These are just things to start working into your day, because sensory could be playing a role in how your child interacts with their world. These are the references that I use when creating this presentation. And I've listed some additional resources here that I found really helpful. We're going to make the slide deck available as a PDF, so that you'll be able to access these links and see some of my suggestions again. I have some podcasts here. These specific episodes I thought could be helpful, but then the podcast shows themselves deal a lot with sensory in a variety of topics, so feel free to explore that. And then different links for other heavy work, proprioceptive input ideas. And then the Understanding Your Child's Sensory Signals is a book written by an OT. It's really thin. It's not a sit down and read the whole book. It's a reference book. So it has a lot of different scenarios of, oh, does your child not like to walk on surfaces without their shoes on or something? It'll give you a sensory explanation of why might they be doing that. And then it gives some tips for how to help them cope through that. So I find this book very helpful just as a reference guide, and to educate yourself a little bit more.